Good afternoon, Patriots. This is the American Vision, broadcast on the TLBTV network and brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Bill Muckler, and I'm coming to you from my home studio in Cocoa, Florida. And today I have a very special guest, Don Pearsall. Don is a good friend. He's a fellow author. He's a fellow vet. Actually, he's a combat vet from Viet Nam. And he's involved in connections. And let me get this straight. He's involved in connections to a new life, which is helping seniors. He's very involved with veterans as far as PTSD is concerned. And he's also the district commander of District 8 in Brevard and Osceola County, which is kind of southwest of us. And he has now 13 posts in District 8. And we'll let Don tell you more about that because we just added number 13, which is kind of a neat thing. And this is his book here, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. So, Don, welcome to the show, and tell us, where you're from, where you grew up, and how you got to the point where you were in the Army.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity, Bill. It's been a while since I've seen you, a couple of weeks. But, yeah, I live also in Cocoa, Florida, and I'm from upstate New York, up around the Watertown area, up on the Canadian border. I was born and raised on Long Island, but I went into the Army right out of high school. And all I ever wanted to do, I had a passion for flying. So all I wanted to do was fly, a pilot. I wanted to just fly anything, anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I enlisted in the Army to do that. And unfortunately, I just didn't have I just about used to pass 8th grade math. So I didn't really have a strong math background, which for pilot's exam, I failed twice because of math. And then I thought that was a Fort Walters, Texas. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to fly. And I would be just a regular foot soldier in Vietnam, which I didn't really like that idea. But it was then my first sergeant said, well, geez, if you still want to fly, you can be a door gunner or a crew chief. And that's what I went into the Army. And I did 2 tours in Vietnam. And it was quite an experience. I got shot down on February 18th of 1968 during the Tet Offensive and spent some time on the hospital ship after I went to the MASH unit in Tay Ninh. And then we got shot down again November the 2nd of the following year. And that's when they rotated me back to the States. They figured they couldn't get no more out of me.
So you were shot down twice in Vietnam, and you were actually a door gunner aboard a helicopter.
UH-1 Huey. Yep, I was on a Huey. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember exactly how many missions we had, but I remember the incidents when they happened. that you'll never forget.
I would imagine with 2 tours and being shot down twice, you'd have a lot of memories. And of course, there were so many of young men who went over to Vietnam. And what a lot of people don't understand is that when we talk about vets and we talk about our fallen heroes, we're not talking about old grizzled guys like ourselves or guys in their 30s or 40s that have been around a lot. We're talking about guys that are 18, 19, 20 years old that are thrust into a completely different environment.
Right. And, now I do a lot of, because of my book, when we discuss that, I can tell you some things about that what prompted me to write the book the way I did. Mm-hmm. And, it was just one of these things that I had to do, and even like with your book, I read your book. It's something that you put forward because you had a passion for it and you were good at it and it made sense. And that's the same thing I try to do with my book.
Well, thank you. Yes, and I guess I have to give a disclaimer here. Don and his some of the people involved in the VFW, notably Jerry and I guess Dorothy, they bought a lot of my books and passed them around and everything. So, I'm eternally grateful for that. And speaking of the book, I've got something here I can show the background. This is a book, and you can see that on the cover, which I have here, and also Don signed for me if anybody can see this. When you came back from Vietnam, you probably received a warm welcome on the West Coast when you arrived?
Not really. Not really. I was, we refueled in Yokota Air Base in Japan. And on the way from Japan to Anchorage Airport in Alaska, we were going to be going in to refuel there again and down to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I'd be debriefed into civilian life. And it was then that they told us of all the political and unrest of the American public, and not to wear our uniforms in public, not to make yourself look so conspicuous in the Army. But here you have a tan from being in the tropics for 2 years and a high and tight haircut, carrying an Army duffel bag across the airport floor. You didn't need a sign, you know. And a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people, they tell me, oh, they spit on the soldiers and stuff. I've never had that. The only thing I did have is when I was at the Anchorage Airport, there was one seat left in a row of a whole bunch of people, and I took that last seat, and when I did, 4 or 5 people got up and walked away from me. The only thing that really ever happened to me that caught my eye. The rest of the time, people were pretty, they didn't talk to me, but they weren't aggressive either, because I was right in the mood then to be aggressive. So I guess they kind of fixed that.
Yeah, I've interviewed quite a few Vietnam vets, and most of the experiences were pretty bad. And I'm glad that yours was more welcoming, I guess, at least much more than many. So
plus too, Bill, I traveled at night. That made a big difference too, because like the flight from Anchorage Airport, from Fort Lewis, Washington, and Seattle, I had to fly to Texas in order to fly home to New York. I had connecting flights all over the country. And when I did, they were mostly at night, so there were very few passengers around, you know. So I didn't really have that big a problem.
So when you arrived back, though, were you discharged then, or did you have more service?
I had another year. And they sent me to Kimbrough Army Hospital to be checked out, and then I stayed at Fort Meade, Maryland, for duty. And I worked with the 6th Armored Cavalry down there, which going from helicopters to tanks was a little bit of a change.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, no flying there, is there?
I know. So, but they figured cavalry was cavalry. It didn't matter if they had cavalry or armored cavalry. You know?
Yeah, that's great. And so then when you left the Army, where did you go then?
Well, first thing what I did is I took a job as a sheriff's reserve down on Long Island, because I still lived on Long Island. I took a job in there until something good came along. And then I finally, down the road, went to work for the phone company, for Verizon, and which is now Verizon. Back then it was New York Telephone. And they split the Baby Bells up, and it became 9X. And then I had moved upstate in the meantime, and I was volunteer fireman and sheriff reserves and stuff like that. And I did that but most of my pension is like from the phone company and stuff like that.
Yeah, and for anybody that's watching, for all of you that are watching, Don has pretty much devoted his entire life to community service and helping others and so forth. And so in his book, Back from the Front, which you probably can't see the entire title from here, but he has a subtitle here, PTSD, Understanding You and Your Caregivers, and that's something that Don has developed himself into. And there's something that caught my eye when I first got the book, and I opened it up and I read, "This book is dedicated to the military men and women that suffer from wounds that will never heal and their caregivers." So I thought that was, a very touching dedication. But then in the introduction, this is what really got me, and I've never heard anyone say this before, and I think this is something that's really important. And Don is really involved in PTSD and helping prevent veterans suicides and everything like that. All of us are here in Brevard County. We're really dedicated to all that. But he writes, post-traumatic stress disorder is not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. And Don, how did you come across that? Because that's really a powerful statement. And I hope that, you know, a lot of the vets and people who see this, that vets, their family and friends can start to understand this, that there's nothing wrong with a person. It's what happened to that person.
Yeah, that's very true, Bill. And when you stop and look at it, in order to treat PTSD, you need to understand what exactly it is and what it means when people, what the terms like reoccurring events and triggers and responses and event avoidance and flashbacks. All of these terms have all separate meaning, but they're very important when it comes to the treatment of PTSD. Now we're trying to reform ourselves to get rid of the D off the end of PTSD.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I've heard many vets who are from, you know, like the Gulf Wars and the Iraq and Afghanistan are talking about that, and go on and explain that, because that's really important.
The reason I think that it's being done is because it doesn't look good on a resume if you're going to look for a job and an employer sees the word disorder, and automatically when you say disorder, there's a stigma of there's actually something wrong with you, a mental disorder. And that's not the case at all. There's people with PTSD, like myself. I'm 100% PTSD graded from the VA because of what happened. You need 7 criteria to get, or 7 incidents, they figured, to get a PTSD rating. I had 121. So, I mean, I was kind of a slam dunk because of what happened in Viet Nam. But the thing is, when they see the word disorder, that stigma can prevent you from getting a decent job, because an employee is going to say, well, hey, you know, this guy's got PTSD. But they don't realize that somebody with PTSD can still have a healthy, productive life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say, well, you know, that's why we want to get rid of this D. It's not a disorder. It's not an affliction. It's not, your life is not in turmoil all the time because of it. It's just it's a stress. That's all it is. And that can be controlled. And that's what my book's about.
Yes, and what got to me, and maybe you can correct me, is when I hear disorder, that sounds like it's something that happened that, you know, to the end of, that's the individual. It's the individual's makeup or fault or problem or whatever. But it's really, like you wrote in your book, it's what happened to someone that they had no control over. You had no control over getting shot down over Viet Nam, for example.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, like when you have PTS, it could be brought about by many things. It could be from one event. It could be from reoccurring of the same event. Like, for example, in Vietnam, we would go out and fly. We would never know if we were on a mission to insert or extract troops into the jungle. We never knew from one second to the next if we were going to get hostile fire from the ground, enemy ground fire. So we treated every LZ, every landing zone, like it was a hot landing zone. That is a reoccurring fear. Whereas being shot down and crashing in the jungle is just one event. So you can get PTSD from reoccurring events, one single event, or a combination of both. Mm-hmm. And this is why now we're trying to do away with this D. In fact, I'm ready to republish this book again because I'm running out of it. So when I do, we're going to take the D off.
We're going to take the D off, so I can move over here and take the D off.
Yeah, you can move over. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Now, it's something that I've never asked you before, and a lot of vets don't like to talk about, but you were your helicopter shot down twice. I presume that you received Purple Hearts?
Correct.
How many do you have?
2.
2? And what other decorations did you have from Vietnam?
Well, I had like it's more or less a Vietnamese flying cross, but that's really the only one I had from Vietnam other than the campaigns and stuff like that.
Okay.
You know?
Well, you definitely are a decorated combat vet. I should have said that right from the beginning. I wanted to get that in. So eventually, you had all these stories, because in the book, and this is really a book of like case histories or stories. There's so many chapters in here that pertain to different subjects. When did you start actually writing these down, or did you have notes from them, or just memories?
Well, what happened was my memories served part of the story, but then I got to thinking about other veterans. I wanted to talk to veterans who had it just as bad, if not worse, than I did. What incidents they had and how they cope with it, and how, even more importantly, is how their caregivers cope with it. Everybody forgets about caregivers, the wives, the mothers, the brothers, and the sisters and stuff. Everybody forgets about these people, and these people, boy, I tell you what, to be a caregiver takes a lot of challenge, especially if you come into a relationship and you have PTSD yourself from an auto accident or a child molestation or anything like this, bullied at school, and you go into a relationship where your loved one has PTSD problem. Well, then it makes it even worse. But I wanted to talk to the people. I interviewed one of the sailors there who was on the USS Cole when it got bombed. I talked to another Marine, which I know is dear to your heart as a Marine veteran. I talked to one of the Marines who was at the barracks in Beirut when it was bombed. I talked to a Pearl Harbor survivor, a World War II survivor, was on the battleship. He was a cook on the battleship that actually spotted that submarine that morning trying to sneak into Pearl Harbor. So I tried to pick people who were in distinguished roles in their military career. And then after I interviewed them, a couple of days later, I would call the caregiver and talk to them privately. Usually, like if the person was away during the day, I'd call the caregiver and just say, okay, here's what his problems are, what he tells me. Now, I want to hear what your problems are. How do you cope with his problems? You know, so that's basically how.
Yeah, and I think you're the only person that I know of that's actually doing that. I mean, taking it to that level, the caretaker level too, because most of the emphasis and focus is on the individual themselves. And it can be men or women too, by the way.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So then you put all this together in a book. Now, you did, I remember talking with you some years ago when you were in the process of finishing up writing a book and getting ready to publish it. And, you know, we're both kind of trying to learn how to do all this stuff. When did you come down to Florida?
I came here in 1991. I retired in 95, but I came here in 1991 as a snowbird.
Mm-hmm.
And I was married at the time, and I moved down here. Oh, no, excuse me. I was single at the time. I moved down here and got married shortly afterwards. And then I lived in West Palm Beach for a number of years, and then I moved to Okeechobee where I had a farm. And then I moved over to Cocoa area because I liked it in this area. You know?
Moved back up here to Cocoa, which for anybody that's watching, Cocoa is in Brevard County, and Brevard County is very heavily populated with veterans, and we have a lot of military installations here. Actually, in Cocoa, we're west of Cocoa Beach, which everybody always, when they say, where do you live? I say Cocoa. They say, oh, you mean Cocoa Beach, because they know that from my Dream of Jeannie and the space program and everything else. But, you know, we're just right across from Cape Canaveral here. And we also have something that's very unique here in Brevard County. Is we have a Veterans Memorial Center, which is very active in helping vets, and it's staffed with volunteers, and veterans can go there for various services and so forth. So this county is really focused on veterans and of course active duty personnel as well. And so Don, how did you get involved in the VFW? Were you in the VFW when you were up in New York, or?
Yes, yes, I joined when I was up in New York. My dad was a commander up there, and I joined the post, and I was very unwelcomed by World War II veterans who were there. They kept saying, well, Vietnam's a police action, and my response was, well, why didn't they send cops, you know, if it was police action? And so I kind of drifted away from the VFW for a lot of years, and then I started going again down when I was in Boynton Beach, where I lived down in West Palm. And I just kind of hung around there every once in a while. And then when I came up here and I moved in here, I got to meet, you know, Jerri Osborne and her husband, Ed.
Yes.
I happened to run into them, and Ed was a Navy veteran. He kept telling me about VFW in Rockledge. So I joined the Rockledge Post because I got tired of hearing them. So it's all right, I'll join. So I joined the VFW there, but I told him, I said, I swore, there's no way am I going to do anything here. I'll help out, maybe serve a meal once in a while, but don't get me involved in being an officer. And the next thing I knew, 4 years later, I was the commander of the post. And then I guess I must have done a good job because then I was offered the position I'm in now as district commander. So instead of having one post with headaches, I got 13 headaches, you know. So, but mostly it's really good because the commanders I have now, I have about 5,800 members, I think, total in the command. And the men that are commanders now are seasoned commanders. They've been commanders 2 or 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So they really know how to get the programs done and how to approach things and accomplish things, which makes my job a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, and I know, for example, you all just started a new VFW post the first of the year. I think it was in January at the Veterans Memorial Center. So they meet there. So that was number 13 for you. So tell us a little bit about what the VFW actually does, because you're very active in the community.
Well, VFW is the community. And what we do is we have programs that benefit not only veterans, but the community. We have hospital programs. We have, like, the Cooties is a hospital program, which I believe the Cooties is something like the Marine Devil Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. I'm not sure exactly the Marine Corps terminology, but we have that, and we do a lot of work with the youth and the schools, a lot. And like I said, a lot with the veterans. We do a lot with the veterans.
Mm-hmm.
The VFW has done many good things over the years. They're responsible for the GI Bill, for example. Without the VFW, the GI Bill was just somebody's idea. But the VFW made it happen years and years ago.
I had never heard that before. That's interesting.
Yeah. The new post we opened up was January 27th. You're right, it's the first year. January 27th, we had our institution of the post. We had 61 members, I believe, to charter. They come in as a charter. So it happens that the VFW turned out to be a real good thing for Merritt Island. It's a thing we're trying to get away from the stigma of the VFW being a smoke-filled bar with a bunch of old people playing bingo. I mean, that's the way it used to be. And in some cases, I'm sure it's still that way out of state. But in Florida, we have more of a think out of the box type of how we're going to make this organization better. And the current commander-in-chief, Keith Harmon, who's the national commander, said his idea was to have a change of direction. Well, that's exactly what this Merritt Island Post does, because there's no canteen there, and it's a non-smoking post.
Yeah, so, and I can attest to that because I also belong to the Marine Corps League, which meets there on the first Thursday of the month, and I also belong to the American Legion, which meets the last Thursday of the month, and our VFW post meets is it the third Thursday of the month. So and I didn't realize this, but you're saying 5,800 members in your 13 posts. So that is really an indicator of how many vets are in this area.
Oh yeah, yeah, and this is one of the smaller districts, Bill. You get down like a Miami-Dade County, down in Miami, Hialeah, Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale. You get a lot of people down there. And on the West Coast, the same thing. You got Saratoga, you got Sarasota, you have Punta Gorda, Fort Myers, another big place. Clearwater, another big place. You got the big VA hospital over in St. Petersburg, which is a lot of veterans. You got 2 Air Force bases over there with MacDill and Eglin. So we got Patrick over here by us. And you know, so it is a big veterans network in the state of Florida.
And one of the benefits is just for the members themselves, because like all our organizations, like the American Legion and Marine Corps League, the VFW, it's a place where vets can go and meet, and you can be with your brothers, and you feel comfortable with them. You can talk about things, and there's a certain bonding, I guess, that still exists. Exactly. Because people don't understand in the military, when you're there, you really bond with the people you serve with.
Oh, without a doubt, you're 100% correct. Because you were a Marine, I was the Army. I feel sorry for you because you were in the Marine Corps. You couldn't make the Army. And like, if somebody says, well, the Air Force, well, you mean the guys with the planes, that's the Air Force. You know, we kid each other all the time. Jokingly, we kid each other about our branch of service. But don't let an outsider do that.
No.
we are brothers, man. It don't matter if you're Marine and Navy or what, you know?
For sure.
Everybody says, well, the Marine Corps department and the Navy, so department and the Navy, and the Marine will say, yeah, the men's department, you know, and things like this. I mean, it's just honest camaraderie, joking around, but we all share the same thing, you know.
Yeah, and you recall when I wrote my book, I was trying to bring out the point that everybody in America needs to pull together, and we need to think of ourselves as brothers and sisters instead of adversaries. And I talk about, you know, example of in the military, all branches of the service are equally important. We just have different missions and different objectives. But, you know, if we weren't important, why would we have them? They wouldn't be here. And just like everyone in the military service is equally important. And whether you're an E1 or a 4-star general, because you need everybody to carry out the mission, everybody to attain the objectives, and everybody to make it all work.
I mean, it's just like everybody, you come up with the little acronyms like the Marines, you know, Uncle Sam ain't released me yet, and all this other stuff, and the Army is not ready for Marines yet, you know, stuff like this. Everybody, you know, it's just it's a great feeling to know if you walk in, and if I walk in Walmart and I see a veteran, I'll go over and shake his hand, talk to him.
I do the same thing. And the vets in this area are really proud to be vets, because you always see somebody, they'll have a cap on, or they'll have a shirt on, or something like that. They'll remind you or identify you. And I know I like to wear gear like that too. And I see, you know, a lot of times I see somebody that's in a wheelchair, I can recognize he's a lot older than me, and I'm pretty old. I know that they were from Korea or World War II, and it makes me feel good, makes them feel good to go up and thank them for their service, ask them where they served, and things like that.
We're seeing now, the biggest problem I'm having now is I'm doing the FEMA meals for the homeless veterans, right? I take them into the woods. Now, my book is made for homeless veterans. It's made for people who have PTSD problems. It's full of self-help tricks, how to help yourself with your responses to triggers and flashbacks and things like this. And the publisher had given me 5 copies to give out as promotionals. But I see so many vets in the woods now that can really use it because they have no caregivers. They're all by themselves. So I've been giving out the book. I've been just giving it to them. Well, now, yeah, that one.
Yeah, and actually, Don gave me the copy of the book. I didn't even know he was going to do it, and so I felt like it's such a worthy cause, and he's such a gentleman and generous person to do this. So it is Connections to a New Life. That's something we could talk about.
That's my agency. It was formed in June of 2015. My partner, Jerri Osborne. Yeah, and she works with your wife, I believe.
Yeah, with Laney, yeah, at Trafford Real
Yeah.
Estate, of course.
Yeah, and her and I formed the business. We went to school, got our certificates and degrees in life coaching, and then I went beyond that on different courses that I took. And that's when I decided to write the book. It says that everything I'm learning and everything I'm seeing, everything I'm feeling myself as a veteran who was under the conditions I was under at one point in my life, gave me an insight to make a book that all it says is been there and done that. I know what you're going through. And that's why I'm trying to get this book in the woods. The only problem is I can't afford to do it anymore. The agency can't afford to give this book out anymore. And now I'm trying to find sponsors like the VFW, like the Daughters of American Revolution, like NVHS, all these organizations. Hey, look, even if you buy one book and I'll give it to a homeless veteran, you know, in the woods. I just can't afford to give them out anymore. And they're the people who need them the most and can't afford them. They can't afford to buy them, and I can't afford to keep giving them out anymore.
Yeah,
so
I understand.
Now we're trying to get the word out for somebody to help us back this book and buy 3 or 4 copies, and we'll get it in the woods. Even if you go with me, we'll take it in the woods and give it to the veterans who need them. You know, it's just I went to the VA, and the VA, you know, the bureaucracy in the VA goes crazy. You know, I mean, most of these veterans would be dead by the time they do anything about it. You know, so I feel strongly enough that this book helps people so much that need it. That's why I've been giving them out. They gave me 5 copies to give away, and I gave out like 115, 117. I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and speaking of the book, you really get into some really delicate subjects in here, like drug abuse and sex and everything. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. Maybe just a little flavor, so people will know that hey. This book's available, and then we'll talk about that later too.
Okay, but one thing that we cover in the book is, and we didn't have it, you and I didn't have it when we did our tours of duty, is MSTS. That's military sexual trauma syndrome. The only women we had in Viet Nam were nurses or worked on hospital ships offshore. We didn't have the women serving in the roles that women do today, the females. And what happens, no matter how much you train military, men are men and women are women, and things are going to happen. And what happens is a woman will come out, or a man, you know, there's been military sexual trauma against a man too, but mostly women, and they have some problems with sexual assault, even in some cases rape. And this creates what they call military sexual trauma, which is the same as PTSD, but for females. A lot of times, some of this stuff is swept up under the carpet, like back in the 80s when they had tailhook, that tailhook scandal with the Navy pilots.
Navy pilots, yeah, naval aviators.
Swept under the rug for many years. Well, now we don't do that anymore. We want women to seek help when they get out of the military, because it's going to affect them the rest of their life. And what you want to try and do is minimize that effect. And by doing that, women feel like they're being understood more, they're being cared for more. So we want these things to be reported, but we didn't have that. But with the amount of people in the military today, I think 12% of the military, 9 or 12% of the military is female. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for military sexual trauma. And it's the same as PTSD, but just it got a different name, but it is still the same. So that's something else that we're looking into now. You know Robin, right? Robin Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah, she is studying now to be a service officer for the DAV. This is what we need. We need more women service officers. I know even with Connections to a New Life, a lot of the clients Jerry and I get that want to talk about their issues may not be issues of PTSD in the military. It could be relationship problems or behavior problems with kids or anything like that. We're finding that if you have a choice of a man or a woman to talk to, the person's going to feel more comfortable. A lot of women who will not talk to me, they have problems and they'd rather talk to Jerry, and you can understand why. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
I think that what Robin's doing is very admirable. I'd love to see more veteran, and Robin's a veteran to boot. You know, Air Force veteran, even though the Air Force, you know how we feel about the Air Force. I mean, they get PTSD from having lumps in their potatoes, you know. But the thing is, people like that is what you need today. You need a lot of women, female service officers to help these women that come back with sexual trauma, because it is a big issue, and we got to admit that, you know.
Yeah, and I think we can bear that out with what's happening in America today. When we hear, it seems like in the news, every time we turn around, there's somebody is coming forward and saying they were abused by some Hollywood star or some news anchor or whatever, and we're just seeing this, and so obviously it's going to happen in the close quarters of the military.
And now it's getting to the point. It's getting to the point where now it's not being swept under the carpet anymore.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because if we get this out in the open, then maybe we can do something about it. At least we recognize the problem so we can find solutions.
Well, that's why even in my book, I have several stories of women who were victims of this, and what was done about it, where they went to the commandant. One happened to be a Marine, and there was a couple. I interviewed a woman from the Air Force who was working at her job in Korea in the Air Force, and she had 24 years in the Air Force. She's getting ready to retire, and they had a party. When they had a party, they drugged her or something, and she was telling me all about that and all what happened and how she's coping with it today. I helped her try to get the help she needs, you know. But it's a serious issue, and PTSD is one of these things that's just not going to go away. I mean, we get 22 suicides a day. There's reasons for that, though. I mean, there's a reason for the 22 suicides a day. And I do this in my workshops too, Bill. When you and I were in school, we both lost friends on the weekend or something like that. Oh, so-and-so was killed in a car accident. Oh, yeah, you feel bad, right? You feel bad when your friends die. But you didn't close the school. You didn't have grief counsels. You didn't have homework for a week. You never had to do any of this. You pulled your big boy pants up and you moved on. Well, these kids today don't do that. Oh, they got to have a grief counsel, and then they have to have a day where they can use their coloring book and Play-Doh and this and that. We're treating them too much with kid gloves. So, and by doing that, when they're ready to go to the military and they go to Afghanistan or Iraq or any other conflict we have, and then they're not prepared to see what they're about to see, and they're not prepared to do what they have to do. And that's what causes what they call moral injury, MI. Moral injury is guilt and shame. This is what's creating a lot of suicides today. And we need to stop that. The military is no help. Military trains you to be a warrior, but they don't train you to be a civilian.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we can see this all over. Actually, when you're talking about the 22 a day, I've done a lot of research in that and talked to a lot of vets. And what I'm finding out is that number might be grossly unreported, because there's only, I believe, 23 states that actually report suicides, veteran suicides. And then another thing I found out, which has really saddened me, is families that have a vet that committed suicide. They don't want to have that reported because they feel like that's a stigma or something to be embarrassed about. And so they get the doctors to say, well, it was a heart attack or it was a stroke or something like that. So, this is really an epidemic that I know you are really in the forefront of just about everybody I know, trying to help resolve this issue and help our vets.
Yeah, and and too, Bill, it's the VA is no real big help in this area, because I talked to a lot of our outpatient clinic in Viera, the Discovery Clinic, which is a mental health and behavioral clinic over there. I talked to a lot of veterans just in passing that had just come out of there, and they found out they were no use whatsoever. the psychologist is a young psychologist who is telling them everything they've learned in the book or learned in college or read out of something. They're 39-year-old psychologists. Don't get me wrong, they're great, but the veteran can't relate to them and they can't relate to the veteran. I can see the war through their eyes. I was knee deep in it. And so I was even telling one of the psychologists down at we were talking one day, and she had told me, she said, "More, I learned more from you than, just by talking, of how I help veterans through peer support."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can look at a veteran and tell by the look in his eyes what he's just about thinking sometimes, and it's just because I've had the experience of doing it so long.
Mm-hmm. And so you put all this in your book, and what I'd like to do is tell people when you read this book, and I'm certainly I can tell you this from my own personal experience. I wasn't able to sit down and read the entire book in one sitting. So what I read is I started just reading chapters at a time. And the way Don has written this book, they're very short chapters. So people will tell me about my book. They say, "Well, I don't have time to read." And I think, you don't have time to sit down and spend 5 or 10 or 15 minutes a day to read something, to learn something, to enhance your knowledge. And so like here's a chapter here, 44, and I just got this at random. Your PTSD affecting your children. And it talks about that and everything. And it's only 6 pages long. How you can read that in 5 to 10 minutes and get something out of this book, or you can read 20 or 30 pages if you like. Then you can go back and you can bookmark it and so forth. Bend the pages back, whatever you want to do, and go back and reread something because all this is valuable.
We send you a bookmark when you order one online. We send you.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. So people can order this book online, and where can they get it online?
Okay, our website is www.connectionstoanewlife.com.
Right, and that'll be in the article that accompanies this video. And what about Amazon? Can they get it there?
Not anymore, because Amazon was having a problem with the royalty table. Because the book is selling international, the royalties are different, like in Australia and Europe and stuff, and it was kind of screwing up our book. So for the time being, we took it off of Amazon. We'll put it back on again later this fall. But in the meantime, you can order it direct from the website, www.connectionstoanewlife.com.
And that comes from you then?
Yeah, it'll come right from me.
Yeah. And I can attest to this because I've had the same experience with Amazon, and there's a lot of great things about Amazon, but for authors, Amazon's really not your best friend. And I've actually taken my books off of Amazon because of all the intricacies now with them growing so big, and all the the commissions they want and the royalty issues and everything.
And what's nice about this book too, Bill, is that this book last year won the 2017 Reader's Choice Award from the American Literary Guild for veterans military mental health. And right after it won the award, I was approached by the Israeli Defense Ministry, and they wanted a copy of the book, and I sent it over to them. Of course, I sent that free to them,
Mm-hmm.
And, they looked at it, and then they ordered 30 more books that they wanted to put in the doctor who spoke to me was a clinic psychologist in Israel, and he was telling me about the PTSD problems they have with their border to Palestine and the actual cycle of violence in Israel today. And they found the book very helpful, so they want to put it in all their clinics, which I think was really a fantastic thing. I mean, with all the VAs around the world that I've talked to Russia, Argentina, Japan, China, a lot of them. And Israel really liked the book, and they said, hey, this is something we can eat, because there's a lot of little stories in there too that maybe not be related right to what we're talking about. That's doing one thing. When I made this book, I did one thing. I put stories in there that were pertinent but I put them in the order that where it would ruin your concentration of what happened to you. Because when I put my story in there, I found that a lot of people were looking at it, or, you know, this is what happened to me. So I would break it up by putting something different in there. Like, for example, one of my clients right now is a North Vietnamese soldier. I mean, and people told me, wow, he's North Vietnamese. Were you? Well, yeah, the war's over. You know, he's a chef in a five-star restaurant, a five-star hotel up in Canada, in Quebec. And he called me. He has a Vietnamese accent. He told me, he said, you may not want to work with me because I was a North Vietnamese soldier. And I said, you got PTSD? I'll work with you. The war is over. You did what you had to do. I had to do what I had to do. And we became friends because of that.
What we have to remember, and people understand, because I hear so many people talk about, oh, they hate the military, whatever. That North Vietnamese soldier wasn't in the military because that was something he really wanted to do. He was there because he had to be there. Just a lot of our guys in World War II, Viet Nam, and so forth, you know, were drafted. So, you know, you weren't there because you wanted to be. You were there because you had.
Right, which was his case. He was a conscript. But I learned so much from him, Bill. You wouldn't believe what I learned about the tunnel system in the days of the French back in the 50s. And he was a wealth of information. His wife, him and his wife and one daughter escaped into China when South Vietnam fell. His other two daughters were killed in a bombing raid over Hanoi. And so it was him and his wife and his daughter. They escaped to China and then eventually made their way to Canada. And he's got a hell of a story. And when I started working with him, I enjoyed just talking to him on the phone because we taught each other so much, you know?
Yeah.
And he said, he did say to me, I asked him what his passion was. He said he loved to sing karaoke. And I said, well, that ought to be pretty interesting. He says, well, maybe I'll come down to the United States and you and me can go to the VFW and sing karaoke. I said, well, wait a minute now. I don't know if they're ready for you yet. You know? We got to introduce you easy as a North Vietnamese soldier. You know?
Yeah. No,
what a nice man. What a nice man. You know?
Yeah. And that's interesting how you meet so many good people. Now, I wanted to mention something else about when I took, one of the reasons I took my books off of Amazon was people would say, well, I ordered your book from Amazon, but you didn't sign it. I said, well, that's because they ship it out of a warehouse. I don't have it. I don't touch it, you know. So they said, we want you to sign it. So they'd mail me the book and I'd sign it and mail it back to them. But this way is a heck of a lot easier. And I know that if you order this book from Don is going to personally sign it and inscribe it just like he did for me.
The night I bought your book, we were at a little function with the Chamber of Commerce down at the Veterans Center on Merritt Island. You had a little card table set up. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yep. And your wife was there, and my partner was there, and I bought your book, and you signed it for me that night.
Right. Yeah. So and I know Don really enjoys doing that as all authors do. So what I want to do is I want to encourage you all to buy this book and help Don with this cause. And you don't have to be from Cocoa or Cocoa Beach or Brevard County or Osceola County or Florida. You can be anywhere in the United States, all 50 states or all 194 countries that are in the UN to get this book, read this book. And another thing that I thought we should talk about, Don, is people who know vets, and maybe they're a neighbor, maybe they're just a good friend or an old classmate or a relative, maybe a close or distant relative. Buy this book for them and get it to them, and Don will sign it, and you can get it to them, and they can read it. And even if they say, well, they don't have time to read or they don't read a lot, you can still read this book because this book is really written in a very good way. It's like reading some case studies or so forth. They're all interesting vignettes in the book. So,
and you know, too, Bill, excuse me, another thing too that we do when we send that book out, I send a little paper with it saying about how I wrote the book and everything. And if they don't understand, there's my phone number. You call me and I will explain it to you even more. I mean, a lot of people just sell a book and you're out the door. If you don't understand anything, well, figure it out yourself. I don't do that. You know,
Well, that is really a tremendous service, and I think it's so helpful, and like you're saying, a lot of people that you know, authors, they sell the books, you know, they go out of the bookstore or something like that, and it's not any different than just you know, buying a toy for a kid or something like that. You just
yeah.
you go in and grab something, and you never think about that. So
Yeah, I've heard you explain to people about your book.
mhm.
You know, and that's a good thing that authors do that. And I don't want, especially PTSD is a very serious thing, and I don't want people to think that they're doing something wrong or something like this, or if they need a further in-depth explanation of maybe some self-help tips or some responses to triggers and stuff like this, you know, and how to do event avoidance and just little tricks. You know, I'd love to help them. You know.
Okay. Well, Don, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. I think we've covered a whole lot, and what we really need to do is have people that watch the video go ahead and get the book and learn about this and do it not so much for just the fact that you're going to buy the book, but do it in the spirit of, I can help somebody if I get this book for them. If I read this book, it gives me a better understanding and help someone. If I give the book to someone, it can help them so much.
Yeah, exactly. And Bill, I want to thank you for what you're doing, man. It's you're doing a good thing now. I like it.
Okay, thank you so much. And so everybody, Don, thank you so much for being a guest, and God bless you and all the vets in the VFW and here and around the world. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Okay, boys and girls, I'm back, and as you can see that we talked a lot about Don Pearsall's book, and I really would love for you to get this book and read this book. It's so important. I know it's really helped me a lot. I enjoyed reading it. It was great. And of course, you can get this book too, but if you're trying to decide which one to get Don's book. And I want to tell you, all the time that he spent on this book and everything that he went through to get it published, and he and I kind of tried to help each other a little bit as people who are just strictly amateurs in this. This book that he sells, this book is for cost. He doesn't have a minute's worth of his time involved in the cost of this book. Just like I've told you, I don't have any time in my book either, because if I put my time in there just at minimum wage, it would be twice as much as what it costs now, and it would be the same way for Don's book. It probably costs 3 times as much if he just put his time in there at minimum wage. So anyway, get the book, right? Get the book, and remember, on my banner here, these are the times that try men's souls, and they certainly are, and they're certainly trying the souls of many of our vets who are trying to cope with the civilian life and to be good citizens and good civilians and neighbors and friends and relatives and so forth. So if you want to do something this time of the year, the 4th of July, Memorial Day, etc., do something for a vet and get this book. This book is so important. I'm probably telling you this too many times. So anyway, thanks for watching the show, and thanks for showing your interest in the American vision. We certainly appreciate all this. And as I always sign off and say, God bless you all for watching, and God bless all of our VFW members, our Marine Corps League members, our American Legion members, and all our active duty personnel. And everybody, all of you, all of our citizens of this country, God bless you all, and God save our America. We need you now more than ever before.